few more. Again, I want to thank our witnesses. You've been very patient, very good. We appreciate you being here. We're going to start with the gentleman from Wisconsin. Then we'll go to the gentleman from North Carolina, unless a member of the minority party shows up. Then we'll go with them, and we'll finish up from there. So the gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 5 minutes.
It's my opinion. First of all, I had a few comments I wanted to have for Mr. Farang, do we call it, before he left. And I have always known there's certain things you think about the English. I know we can't stereotype today, but when you think of the English, you think of irreverence, you think of accepting of eccentricities, right? You think of their dry sense of humor. If we had to crack down on free speech in any country in the world, the country we'd lose the most in is if we crack down on free speech in England, because they are great, aren't they? So there's just a general comment. Now, Mr. Price, there are a variety of things we're trying to get at in this hearing, and some of it is financial and how regulations can hurt companies. But I think the most important thing is to wake up the world in what's going on in Britain, okay, and other countries in Europe. I don't think the average American is aware of that. And it's important they be aware of it, because I think in general, stupid idiot ideas begin in Europe, and then they go to California and New York, and then they seep their way across the United States. And this idea that we can crack down on free speech, I would like you, Mr. Price, just to go through a few examples, including the examples of that poor gal who wound up in prison. Don't be afraid to not be able to say what she said, because we're still in America, it's still a free country. What do you say to wind up having to go to prison for in Britain today? Exactly what do you have to say? Well, you're still in the U.S.
Yes, sir. I am going back to the UK, though, and after what happened to my fellow Irishman, Graham Lenihan, I might just be careful. One thing I would say is that the overbroad laws that we've been discussing and the implementation or the enforcement of the law has reached a point where we now have perfectly legitimate speech being caught up in criminal prosecutions. So for a Christian pastor like Dia Moodley in the city of Bristol, it's a perfectly natural thing to answer a question from a member of the public about the differences between Christianity and Islam. And the fact that he was ultimately arrested under the Public Order Act there for stirring up religious hatred, which a charge they later dropped, and not the people who were assaulting him, gives us an idea of how bad things have gotten in the UK. And we were delighted, of course, that Vice President Vance, in his Munich Security Conference speech, drew attention to this other class of cases involving prosecutions for praying silently or for holding a sign offering consensual conversations in the vicinity of abortion clinics, which is an extraordinary assault on freedom of speech and, I would say, freedom of religion as well.
Okay, when I was looking this up, I didn't know what she said. Apparently, she was critical of a mass murder whose ancestors came from Rwanda. It's now against the law to point that out in Great Britain, apparently.
Yes, that's the case of Lucy Connolly. Lucy Connolly tweeted a tweet where some of us, or I think most people would probably disagree with what she said. She disagreed with it herself. She took it down 3.5 hours later. It was, as Mr. Farage said, in a moment of great tension and great personal stress. And for that, she received a 32-month sentence. And she has been released since, but she was prevented from attending this hearing, which I think is a real shame.
Last week in the United States, we had a horrible murder, and I think it was a Catholic school in Minnesota. The murderer happened to be a transgender. Would that be illegal to point out in England?
If you were, you could very readily see that it could be regarded strong criticism.
He was a very bitter, angry person.
Yes.
Could we point out that, maybe that had something to do with transgender? Could people have that opinion in Britain?
If I were advising people, and this is the chilling effect in action, I would say think very carefully before posting criticism of what happened, that tragedy in the school in England, because you could be accused very easily of stirring up hatred against a group of people.
Stirring up hatred? I mean, that's just preposterous. What is hatred? I don't even know what hatred is.
This is an ongoing discussion among lawyers in relation to
is there any, just so you know, in your understanding, Mr. Reed, is there any Doesn't free speech means I can say things that maybe imply I hate somebody? Can I hate somebody? Is that against the law? No.
Really, I think that's a question that Mr. Price is probably better to handle.
Controversial. Maybe I can't. Well, thank God I'm the type of person who's never hated anybody in my life. But if I was a different sort of person, would it be against the law to say I hate somebody?
Well, the difficulty with it is that we've seen again and again legitimate Christian beliefs being described as hatred when it comes to the definition of marriage, when it comes to sexual relations.
Would it be the easiest thing is to just to enforce the First Amendment and say we can say whatever we want to say? Go back to Old English?
What I would say is you're well blessed in this country to have the extraordinary protections of the First Amendment, and I really do wish we had something similar in Europe.
Well, next time you get back to Europe, straighten them out, kick them in the butt. Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Gentleman yields back. Gentlelady from Texas, who was joined us for part of our visit to the to Europe. We appreciate that. Recognized for 5 minutes.
Yes, I hate that I didn't get to reminisce with our good friend, Mr. Farage. But nevertheless,
At Wednesday's House Judiciary Committee hearing, Representative Glenn Grothman, Republican Wisconsin, engaged in a discussion with Lorcan Price, a barrister with Alliance Defending Freedom International, about the state of free speech in the UK. The hearing began with expressions of appreciation for the witnesses, with Grothman emphasizing the importance of their participation. He mentioned that, while the committee would hear from various members, he would start with the gentleman from Wisconsin, followed by the gentleman from North Carolina, unless a member from the minority party joined. Grothman shared his thoughts on the issue of free speech in the UK, specifically highlighting the country's long history of embracing irreverence, eccentricity, and a dry sense of humor. He suggested that if any country in the world had to crack down on free speech, it would be particularly detrimental in the UK due to their strong tradition of valuing it. Grothman also noted how ideas that initially emerge in Europe, particularly in countries like the UK, often spread to places like California and New York, eventually impacting the entire U.S. He stressed the need for the average American to be aware of what's happening abroad, especially when it comes to speech restrictions. Grothman then asked Price to provide some examples of how free speech laws have been affecting individuals in the UK. Price shared the case of a Christian pastor in Bristol, who was arrested after discussing the differences between Christianity and Islam in response to a question from a member of the public. Although the charge of stirring up religious hatred was eventually dropped, Price emphasized that the pastor had been wrongfully targeted while the individuals who assaulted him were not held accountable. This case, Price argued, illustrated how the enforcement of these laws had reached a troubling point where legitimate speech was being criminalized. The conversation turned to other troubling cases in the UK, such as individuals being prosecuted for silently praying or holding signs near abortion clinics. Price described these prosecutions as a clear assault on both freedom of speech and freedom of religion. Grothman then brought up the case of Lucy Connolly, who had tweeted a critical comment about a mass murder. Though Connolly deleted the tweet within a few hours, she was sentenced to over 2 years in prison. Grothman questioned whether pointing out the transgender identity of the school shooter in a recent U.S. tragedy would be illegal in the UK. Price responded that such an action could easily be perceived as stirring up hatred, which could potentially lead to legal consequences. The discussion delved deeper into the complexities of speech laws, particularly around the concept of hatred. Grothman questioned whether simply expressing dislike or criticism of someone could be considered a legal violation, to which Price explained that legitimate Christian beliefs, such as the definition of marriage, were often classified as hateful under these laws. He noted that in many cases, expressing opinions on such matters could lead to prosecution. Grothman concluded the discussion by expressing his gratitude for the First Amendment, highlighting the protections it provides against such restrictive laws. He lamented the lack of similar protections in Europe and encouraged Price to challenge these laws during his future visits to the continent. The conversation ended on a note of frustration, with Grothman urging the witnesses to continue to raise awareness about the troubling state of free speech laws in the UK and beyond.